Now and for a Powerhouse special with Sheena MacDonald.
Hello and welcome to this special election edition of Powerhouse with me, Sheena MacDonald. With Ken Livingstone on course for victory, the final result in the election for London Mayor is about to be announced as we go on air. Elsewhere, in Romsey, the Liberal Democrats sweep away the Conservatives' 8,000 majority and Labour loses its deposit. And across England, Labour has a little local difficulty. The Tories gain more than 600 seats and take control of 16 more councils. We'll have live reaction from the three main parties and analysis from our regular political commentator, Peter Kellner. That's all after the rest of today's news from Lindsay Taylor.
Hello. The Prime Minister is in Northern Ireland this morning for meetings with Unionists and Republicans in an attempt to revive the flagging peace process. Mr Blair will be joined by the Irish Premier Bertie Ahern for separate discussions with David Trimble and Gerry Adams. Rover has received a boost. Figures out this morning show a big increase in sales in the last 2 months. The Rover 75 sold particularly well, putting Rover in second place behind only Ford. Computer experts are warning of a new strain of the love bug virus that paralysed networks across the world yesterday. It's believed the new variant has been devised by a copycat programmer using as a basis the I love you virus. The new bug disguises itself as an email joke, promising to be very funny. The markets now, and a short time ago the index of 100 leading shares was up by nearly 60 points. The pound was down against the dollar and sterling was down by 2 cents against the euro. That's the news. Now back to Sheena MacDonald.
Now, we hope to have final confirmation of the London mayoral election in a few minutes' time. Yesterday saw a sensational Liberal Democrat by-election victory and a dismal drubbing for Labour in the council elections. In Romsey, the parliamentary by-election caused by the tragic death of Tory MP Michael Colvin produced a shock result. The Liberal Democrats, Sandra Gidley, won over 19,000 votes, over 50% of the total cast, while the defeated Conservative, Timothy Palmer, got only 42%, and Labour's Andrew Howard lost his deposit, getting less than 4% of the total. But the Tories were cheered by their wins in the council elections. In England, over 3,000 council seats in some 152 councils were up for election. The Tories did well. They now control 33 councils, 16 more than they did before the election, and gained nearly 600 more councillors than they did in 1996. Labour lost control of 15 councils and lost over 560 councillors, while the Liberal Democrats fell from power in one council and lost 200 councillors. So a good result for the Conservatives. Jonathan Hawker reports on a long night for the political parties.
Tony Blair tried, but Ken Livingstone's shown his march back to power in London is unstoppable. Despite problems with the electronic vote counting during the night and the campaign itself, the former GLC leader will be the capital's mayor.
We have these divisive elections, and this has been perhaps one of the worst, the dirtiest. Endless negative campaigning, personal investigations of my private life and all that. But if you win, you don't care about that. I mean, if I'd lost, I'd be bitter for the rest of my life, I suspect. But I mean, I'm just leaving that behind me and I'm moving on. If people want to work with me, I'll be delighted.
Ken Livingstone says this should be a wake-up call to the Labour leadership. The Labour candidate Frank Dobson lost out not just to Ken but also to the Tories Steve Norris. The Lib Dem Susan Kramer was only narrowly beaten to third place. The government are now keen to put this campaign behind them once and for all.
People have given Ken Livingstone an opportunity. They've given him a vote of confidence. I doubt very much whether they expect him to spend the next 5 years in a running fight with anybody. I think what they expect all of those who they elect to do is to work together for the good of the country, and in this case for the good of London.
Labour aren't alone in their discomfort today. The Tories lost the Romsey parliamentary by-election caused by the tragic death of Michael Colvin and a house fire. With a swing of 12.5%, the Liberal Democrats destroyed a Tory majority of 8,500.
I don't think it's a vindication of the Hague strategy insofar as there was one. It struck me as desperation. And of course, when you deploy desperate tactics in certain parts of the country, you'll find a resonance. But he didn't find a resonance in what should have been one of the safest Conservative seats in the whole of Britain. That's a very important pointer for the next election.
The Tories, though, were pointing to the local elections across England as the real test. They gained almost 600 seats, winning control of 16 councils.
Clearly, across the country, we have made gains from Liberals and Labour alike. We've done extremely well in places we haven't won elections for a long time. So I think you have to set one election with 30,000 people against one with 5 million. And I'd rather win the one with 5 million.
For Labour supporters, it was a miserable night. They lost over 550 seats and 15 councils, including Basildon, which the party regards as a key area, and traditional northern strongholds like Bradford, Burnley, Hartlepool and Oldham.
You've got to do something about your party, because if you don't, you'll carry on having the results that you've had tonight.
We accept very, very clearly that though we are proud of what we've done, we've got much more to do.
Labour believes many of its core voters stayed at home yesterday. Turnout in London was less than 40%. It now appears the capital's assembly will be hung. So in London today there's only one real winner. And in case you don't recognise him from this, it's Ken.
That report from a sleepless Jonathan Hawker. Now, any second now, we're going to get the final result of the mayoral election, and Jonathan's told us what it's very, very likely to be. But right now, live from Romsey, which is now a Liberal Democrat parliamentary seat, are Charles Kennedy, leader of the Liberal Democrats, and the by-election victor, Sandra Gidley. Good afternoon.
Hello.
And congratulations to you. Sandra, let me come to you first. In winning this spectacular result in Romsey, you targeted Labour voters and urged them to vote tactically for you. So once you get into Parliament, don't you owe it to the Labour Party to support them?
Oh, no, I don't think so. What we were saying to people was, what would you rather see? Would you rather have a Conservative MP, or would you rather unite behind somebody who's campaigning for a better deal for health, education, fighting for pensioners, and to protect the post offices?
Are you very confident that you're going to hang on to it in the, well, upcoming general election?
I'm going to work very hard for the people of Romsey. Very often people like having a Liberal Democrat MP because they tend to be in touch with the issues of the people. Hopefully they'll like what they see and re-elect me next time.
Charles Kennedy, let me ask you, do you read any countrywide implications into this very startling victory?
Yes, I do, Sheena. I think that the implications I read into this, first of all, are that William Hague's reactionary strategy works well where you've got low levels of turnout. It's no good for him talking about a poll of 30,000 in Romsey versus a poll of 5 million in the country. It's a 30% turnout in the local elections and a bit above that, but not a huge amount above that in London, which is a disappointment, but there we are. You can mobilise your hardcore on that kind of message. When you get a 60% turnout and people are actually choosing a member of Parliament, they weigh up the factors in a very different way, as they did in this case, which is why I took the fight to William Hague over these last 2 weeks and confronted him directly about the kind of agenda that he's been peddling.
Well, many congratulations to both of you, to Charles Kennedy and to Sarah Gidley, and thank you very much for joining us. And with me now is our regular political commentator, Peter Kellner. Read the runes on the Romsey result, Peter.
I think Charles Kennedy is basically right to point out this is a larger turnout of the local and the London elections. However, the turnout was down 20 percentage points on the general election. A lot of Conservatives did stay at home there, just as Labour supporters stayed at home elsewhere. I think the Liberal Democrats will do very well if they do hold on to that seat. My guess is it will revert to the Conservatives. But the bigger message is this. People are still in a mood to gang up against the Conservatives. They did it in Romsey, they did it in Winchester, they did it the other way, almost in Beckenham and Edinburgh. If that happens across the country, it's going to be very tough for the Conservatives to win back seats in the next general election.
I ought to allow our Liberal Democrat spokesman to respond to that, but I want to ask you a very quick question, because I've heard in my ear that the result of the result of the London mayoral election is that Livingston has won 58% of the popular vote, and And 42% for Stephen Norris. What's your reaction to that?
That'll be after the second preferences have been distributed. To be honest, it's slightly narrower than I thought. It sounds to me as if Steve Norris has done better on the second preference than we thought, but it's clearly a big victory.
We're going to go straight over to the QE2 Conference Centre in London, where the returning officer Robert Hughes, I think, is about to speak for himself. No, he's changed his mind.
But this is, Sheena, a low turnout election. Ken Livingstone has won a big victory in percentage terms, but in actual votes, he's got, what, 750,000 votes out of 5 million. If Tony Blair wishes to play the mandate game against him, Ken Livingstone's position is not quite as strong as I think most of us would have thought a few days ago when we didn't expect the turnout to be this low.
Well, let's bring in the other people who are sitting very, very patiently waiting to be talked to. With me now are Jim Fitzpatrick, Chairman of the Greater London Labour Party, the Conservatives' London spokesman Bernard Jenkin, and Edward Davey, the Liberal Democrat London spokesman. And I ought to let you have the first say, Edward Davey, since Peter Kellner's cast doubts on your beginning to hang on to Romsey. Do you think you will?
I think Peter's wrong for the reason that Sandra said. I think Sandra will prove herself to be an excellent local MP, standing up for the issues that the people of Romsey voted her in for. More investment in the health service, help for our pensioners who Labour have only given a miserly 75p to, and Conservatives haven't fought that properly. So I think Sandra will win at the next general election, and I think the message is that we'll have a lot more Liberal Democrat MPs at the next election, possibly even overtaking the Conservatives. That's the significance of this result in Romsey. It's a body blow to William Hague. His right-wing extremism has been totally rejected.
We'll come back to Romsey, but let's start with what I think even on a national basis is seen as one of the main election results last night, and we've still to get it absolutely formally, but it seems almost 100% that Ken Livingstone, the independent candidate, is now the London mayor. Now, you represent the three main political parties. I wonder if you think political parties are going out of fashion. What would you say, Jim Fitzpatrick?
No, I hardly think so. There aren't many Ken Livingstones around. I think you'll find it difficult to see him replicated in many of our other cities. He's a singular character, and I think the strength of his personality, based on the romantic vision of the GLC, taking on Mrs Thatcher when nobody else could, the fact that he was seen as a victim, the wrangle that we got ourselves into over selection, which we didn't escape from all the way through this contest, which cost Frank dearly. I don't think there's too many Ken Livingstones around, and I don't think there's too much of a threat to the main political parties. But that's not to take anything away from him. He's a victor, and we'll have to live with him.
Well, you have to live with him. That's a rather grudging congratulations, is it not?
Well, OK, perhaps I'm being a bit curmudgeonly, but he's got the mandate. He is London's mayor. We will work with him. We have to. I don't think any of the political parties on the Assembly will have any choice in that matter.
We're going to come on to the Assembly result in a moment, but I understand that the Tories have, no one has got overall control of the Greater London Assembly, which is a new body, but the Tories have got the greatest number of seats. You're going to have to work with Ken Livingstone as well, aren't you?
Well, the way the Assembly is made up means that if the Assembly wants to control the mayor, there will have to be cross-party alliances. But you asked whether the parties are going out of fashion. This has been a terrible night for the Labour Party. They lost their deposit in the by-election. We have beaten them into second place in the popular vote in the constituencies. We have won more constituencies than Labour in the London elections, and we have completely trounced the forecasts for Conservative victories in the local elections. 600 seats was 200 seats more than the BBC's forecast, which said, oh, that'll do nicely for the Conservative Party if they get 400.
In other words,
it is a disastrous night for the Labour Party.
And that's a very good night for the pollsters, you're suggesting, Peter Kellner.
Well, the pollsters, they did pretty well. I mean, the ICM forecasts for the London election was pretty well spot on. I mean, Bernard's right on the larger point. It's not a pollster's point, it's a pundit's point, and I'm as guilty as any. You know, hands up. I didn't expect 600 Tory gains. They've beaten that. This is absolutely a cause for celebration, but the Tories, in my view, should not confuse celebration for what happened yesterday with optimism that they're really in the running for next year's general election.
Well, I wonder if it is an absolute cause for celebration. I mean, I think we can see now the London turnout figures. That's the number of Londoners who actually voted in this election. Can we see that? There we are. And, well, Peter, you can comment on this.
Right. In 97 was the general election, the big turnout, 68%. 94 and 98 were the two sets of borough elections. Now remember, One of the big points about having a mayor was to get turnout up, to re-energise local government, to reconnect voters with politicians, and it hasn't happened. The turnout's just as bad as it was 2 years ago, and worse than it was in any previous set of borough elections. I think that poses a big question mark over whether the mayor in this form should be extended to other towns and cities. This part of the experiment has failed.
Can I suggest there were two possible reasons for the turnout only being 35? One is that Ken Livingstone's support was higher in the opinion polls than finally was shown. He didn't have the organisation to actually organise that to get to the polling stations. And secondly, a lot of our voters sat in their hands and didn't turn out. When the mayor and the assembly demonstrate the role that they will play over the next 4 years, I think the turnout then should be in one would expect to be higher.
Peter, I'm going to stop you because we are now going to hear the returning officer, the London returning officer, Robert Hughes, who is speaking to us live from the, well, to the nation at large, from the QE2 conference centre in the middle of London.
Which was 38.18% of the eligible voters. There were 5 candidates standing for election. The number of votes each candidate received can be seen on the screen again. As you can see, Tony Arbour of the Conservative Party has been elected as a member of the London Assembly with a majority of 7,059. With the results of all 14 constituency counts now in, I now propose to declare the results of the mayoral election, and I invite the mayoral candidates to join me, please, on the stage. Please. Right, thank you. Thank you for that warm welcome for the candidates. They all deserve it. The total number of votes cast in the election of the Mayor of London was 1,714,162, giving a turnout of 33.6%. This compares to 34% in the last local government election and the GLA referendum in May 1998. The number of first preference votes given for each mayoral candidate was as follows: Geoffrey Ben Nathan, 9,956. Geoffrey Clements, 5,470. Frank Dobson, 223,884. Balram Gidumal, 42,060. Damien Hockney, 16,324. Darren Johnson, 38,121. Susan Kramer, 203,452. Ken Livingstone, 667,877. Michael Newland, 33,569. Stephen Norris, 464,434. Ashin Kumar Tana, 9,015. As no single candidate has won 50% or more of the first preference votes, Kenneth Robert Livingstone and Stephen John Norris, the candidates with the most first preference votes, now go through to the second stage, and I'll announce the results of that immediately. The number of first and second preference votes won by each of these two candidates was as follows: Kenneth Roberts Livingstone, 776,427. Stephen John Norris, 564,137. I therefore declare that Kenneth Robert Livingstone is duly elected the first Mayor of London. I shall now invite the new Mayor of London to say a few words. Mr. Livingstone.
Well, as I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted 14 years ago, I never expected to be back in this form, and I want to start by thanking the returning officer. We know it was the machine's fault. The staff here have been absolutely fantastic, and I'm very glad they were able to warn us about the delay so that we could go home and get a bit of kip. I also want to say a word about my colleagues who fought this election. People who stood for mayor because they love this city. And I want to try and draw a line in the sand between the divisions of this campaign and how we now go forward to govern this city. I want to try and create an administration which will be all-embracing, reach across parties, and try and achieve a position where the new GLA speaks with one voice on behalf of London's interests. I have not the slightest doubt that many of the candidates who've been here through this campaign will want, after some reflection, to help me in that work, and I will be over the next few days approaching several of them to join me in that administration. They stood because they love this city. I'm asking them now to put their talents to work for this city. I have to say, there have been some rather unpleasant things said in the campaign, but not by the candidates. I have had affection and respect from the people that I've been debating with, and amongst the candidates at least, if perhaps not all of the apparatuses of the party machines. There's been dignity and genuine respect, and I want to pay tribute for the way they have conducted themselves. In particular, I want to say a word for my old colleague and friend Frank Dobson, who has borne a terrible brunt of odium, which was not his, but should have been rightly reserved for people who work behind the scenes. And I say, Frank, I hope we're still friends, and I hope we're going to work together in the future. That's all I want to say here, except for this. I believe in regional government. I believed in it all my life. I believe that the government that is best is the government that is closest to the people. And I want to make this system work, and I want and hope that Tony Blair will get that second term in government so that what we do in London in these coming months can be the pattern for regional government for the whole of England after the next election. And I pledge myself to try and heal the divisions that have happened in politics in this city, in particular to heal the divisions between myself and parts of the Labour Party machine, and work together for the better governance of London and hopefully for the return of a Labour government within a year or so. Thank you for those who have supported me. I pledge you my work, and I go from this count to start that job this afternoon in the new building at Romney Road, where the Mayor will actually start the administration of London. I thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So, a historic moment. The first directly elected Mayor of London is Ken Livingstone, and there he is talking to us. Peter Kenner, I think we can get confirmation of the voting figures there, which will bear out what you were saying about the turnout for this election. And can we see them now? Yes, there we are. Ken Livingstone, the first round, that was first preference, 667. The second, and Steve Norris, 464. Norris did very well, did he not? And there's in the final round, of course.
Steve Norris did very well. Makes one wonder, this is sort of a bit like a French election, with the top two going off into a runoff. The difference is, in France, you have a week between the two. People know who the leading two candidates are. There were a lot of wasted second votes, people who cast both their votes for eliminated candidates. Had this gone on for another week with a runoff, a final week runoff campaign between Ken Livingstone and Steve Norris, it might have been a rather different result. I think this was closer. I think Steve Norris has done very well. We can debate whether this is despite or because of being in the Conservative Party, but he did very well.
Well, the talking will go on. I should tell you all that we have one of Livingstone's biographers and a very eminent political correspondent in his own right, John Carville, standing outside. Your reaction? This is a British version of the Comeback Kid, is it not?
Absolutely, an amazing personal story. Here, someone who's been written off in the wilderness in politics for so many years has now come back. I think he's going to feel vindicated, that he'll feel elated. He's got 750,000 votes of the people of London, and I think that he'll feel that he's triumphed against the party machine. But you've heard his acceptance speech, and I thought that was magnanimous. I think there's now going to be a battle between his heart and his head. His heart will be saying, yippee, I've beaten them, they tried to rub me out and I've beaten them. His head will be saying, I've got to work with these people, I'm not going to succeed as mayor unless I get the cooperation of GLA members, London borough leaders and government ministers. And that battle between heart and head will take a little while to settle down, I guess.
Well, also, these people, as you call them, are going to have to work with him, and that includes the Prime Minister and the Chancellor, who went on public record saying, do not, whatever you do, vote for this man. Are they going to change their tune, do you think?
I think it would be very difficult for them to change their policy. I think it'd be very difficult for them to say, well, Ken Livingstone, your policy on the tube is right because the people say so, and ours must be wrong. I think there'll be huge tussles over that. But clearly, as you've heard already in your programme, politicians who've been rubbishing Livingstone for many months are now accepting the will of the people. It's going to be a very difficult decision for Labour people, for Frank Dobson and other GLA members, to know how closely to work with the man that they've been trying to do down.
John Carver, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you, and I'm sorry that we haven't had very much time to discuss, but it's all been such a live programme today, so many thanks to Edward Davey, to Bernard Jenkins, to Jim Fitzpatrick, and of course to our reader of the Roans, Peter Kellner. And that is it from Powerhouse for this special edition today. Channel 4 News is at 7 with further analysis of the election results, and Powerhouse will be back on Tuesday at the usual time, 12 noon, when the guest presenter will be the pollster, Bob Worcester. But from me, for now, goodbye.